It's 8 o'clock. This is the UK Tonight. The Commons in chaos as dozens of MPs call for the Speaker to stand down in a row over votes on a ceasefire in Gaza. Sir Lindsay Hoyle says he was acting out of genuine concern about MP safety. I have the latest live from Westminster. Well, those concerns are being felt in the community too, as a charity warns reports of Islamophobia have gone up by 300% since the war started. We'll be hearing from a woman who's had a brick thrown through her window in Manchester. Also tonight, should the menopause be treated as a disability? The Equalities watchdog says legally it could be, with companies being warned they could be sued if they don't make reasonable adjustments for women. Is it a welcome move or a backward step in normalising something that affects half the population? Plus, more than 3,000 people evacuated from Plymouth thanks to an unexploded World War II bomb. We'll be hearing from one of them. And touching down on the moon. Our science correspondent will be here to tell you all you need to know about tonight's space landing. All that to come and much more on the UK Tonight. Hello. Well, last night we brought you a remarkable breaking story. The Commons thrown into complete chaos in a row over votes on a ceasefire in Gaza. Well, that story has continued to grow today. More than 60 MPs are now formally calling on the Speaker to stand down after he broke with tradition to favour Labour. Well, this afternoon, a visibly emotional Sir Lindsay Hoyle apologised, saying that he'd acted out of a genuine concern for MPs' safety.
I have a duty of care that I will carry out to protect people. It is the protection that led me to make a wrong decision. But what I do not apologise is the risk that's being put on all members at the moment. I had serious meetings yesterday with the police on the issues and threats to politicians, threats heading to an election. And I do not want anything to happen again. So yes, I will apologise. I always will when I make a mistake.
Well, let's go straight to our chief political correspondent, John Craig, who is in Westminster for us tonight. And John, can you tell us more about the concerns the Speaker has about MP safety?
Well, you heard him say there that he had what he called serious meetings with police chiefs yesterday. And clearly, as tensions are heightened, as the Israel-Gaza conflict is right at the top of the political agenda, the MPs are facing threats. Now, we also spoke here on Sky News to Sir Charles Walker. Now, he's a member of the House of Commons Commission. Now, that's a top-level committee in Parliament chaired by the Speaker, and he was saying that they'd had briefings from security chiefs about the threat to members of Parliament. Now, all this comes, of course, just days after the siege at the home of Tobias Ellwood, a Conservative MP down in on the south coast, Bournemouth. And, of course, the Conservative MP Mike Freer a few weeks ago saying he has to wear a stab vest now when he has meetings in his constituency or even surgeries because of the threats. And he's standing down. There was an arson attack on his constituency office. Now, the Speaker was saying, I don't want to have to take a phone call when to hear that another MP's been killed. That was a reference, of course, to Sir David Amess. He also said, I don't want to see another attack on Parliament like the one that happened in 2017. That was the one where a driver drove a car along the pavement just outside Parliament. 50 people were injured and 4 people lost their lives. So clearly, police chiefs and the security chiefs, the spooks presumably, are giving the Speaker and senior MPs really serious warnings about the threat to MPs at the moment. You talk to lots and lots of MPs, they've said they've had death threats. Margaret Hodge, for example, has appeared on Sky News in recent days talking about death threats. She's a Jewish MP. And there are lots and lots of MPs, particularly those who are vocal on the whole Israel-Gaza conflict. They are in the firing line and getting these threats. And also, particularly women MPs are vulnerable. You talk to women MPs, they seem to get much more nasty threats than male MPs. So it is becoming a real concern. So Lindsay, who, of course, got into a terrible row last night, he really came out fighting today with that warning. And the Prime Minister also, while he expressed concerns about what Sir Lindsay did last night, the Prime Minister echoed Sir Lindsay's warning when he was speaking this afternoon. He said we can't have extremists disrupting our proceedings, intimidating and getting aggressive with MPs. So it is becoming a real concern.
OK, John, thank you. John Craig in Westminster for us tonight. Well, barely a week after a Jewish charity said that there had been an explosion of hate, today a report found incidents of Islamophobia are at a record high. Figures from the charity Tell Mama, which monitors anti-Muslim hate crime, show a significant increase since the war began 4 months ago. Well, since the 7th of October attack, the agency has recorded more than 2,000 cases of Islamophobia. During the same period in the previous year, 600 cases of anti-Muslim hate crime were recorded. That means cases have more than tripled since the Hamas attack, a 235% increase. And the organisation says that women were targeted in more than 65% of these attacks. Our chief North of England correspondent Greg Milam reports from Manchester.
It was 5th of February, 2:30 a.m. in the morning. I heard the smashing of the window and I realised that there is a large brick on the floor.
Mahitab says her home was targeted because of the Palestinian flag she put in her window.
The police told me when they saw the brick, they said it could have killed me.
She's chosen to speak publicly to put pressure, she says, on police and councils to take anti-Muslim hate seriously.
I'll not be terrified by those people. They will not stop me from doing what I need to do. They will not stop me from supporting the case I believe is right. I've never thought about changing how I look because of these things, because this is me. I am a Muslim, and this is how we look like.
The police told her they couldn't find the person responsible, and she is one victim among many in what's been a dramatic increase in anti-Muslim hate since the Hamas attacks on Israel on October the 7th. And the figures showed that in almost 2/3 of those incidents, the victims were women.
Anti-Muslim hatred is gendered. Women tend to be targeted because of sexism, misogyny, as well as their visibility, either being Muslim, wearing a headscarf, being of Asian background, speaking a different accent, or being Middle Eastern. But mainly driven by language which is sexist. It's usually a male-to-female violence, where the individual feels that he can have a go at a woman because they feel that they're weak, and definitely not. And equally as well have anti-Muslim slurs attached to that.
The British Muslim Heritage Centre in Manchester has always been much more than just a place of worship. Now it's also a centre where hate crimes can be officially reported, something that many are reluctant to do.
I think there are many reasons why it's underreported, and also I think they don't understand what constitutes a hate crime. So if it's just a bit of verbal abuse, they think, oh, well, that's okay, because maybe people have been used to it. But I think we're living in a day and age where, no, that is not acceptable, and hate crime must be reported.
Like the rise in anti-Semitism, it is happening online and on the streets. And campaigners say social cohesion is at risk unless everyone stands up to it. Greg Milam, Sky News.
Right, let's talk hot flashes, brain fog and insomnia. Just a few of the delightful symptoms for women who are going through the menopause. Here you go, see, it's affecting me already, brain fog. You can spot it on this programme most nights. But the question is, do they amount to a disability? Well, the Equalities Watchdog says legally they could, and companies are now being warned that they could be sued if they don't make reasonable adjustments for women in the workplace. So is this a welcome move to formally recognise the impact of symptoms, which can be debilitating for many women? Or is it actually a backward step in normalising something which affects half the population, 51% in fact? Well, I'm joined now by TV and radio broadcaster Zoe Harman. Zoe went through the menopause at the age of 37, and leading business voice Debbie Wasco, she's here as well. She's also the executive chair of the Better Menopause. Ladies,
hello.
What a time to have brain fog in the middle of an introduction to you both. This is quite startling from the equalities watchdog, or it has been treated as such by many people, to have the menopause, something that will affect all women in some shape or form during their lifetime, as a disability. Zoe, what was your initial reaction?
I think firstly it's really important to say that for me the word disability is not negative. So if this is how loud we have to scream to get some answers, then I'm actually quite thrilled that it's happened. I think for a very, very long time we've been coming into the workplace, shying away in another room, going through horrendous symptoms in some cases, but feeling like we can't talk to our employees about it. So for me, if this means we get more care, more support, a bit more understanding, I'm over the moon about it.
Yeah, Debbie, what was your reaction? Because again, Zoe's quite right, the term disability shouldn't be seen as a negative. If you are registered as disabled, it should offer you some form of protection and support.
Yeah. I felt like it was a Trojan horse. I think it makes for a great headline, and I don't mind that. So to give you some of the stats, 13 million women in the UK are currently in perimenopause or menopause. 50% of those women don't get any medical care at all. 25% of women in perimenopause or menopause consider leaving the workforce, and 10% actually do. So if we are now having this conversation, as an entrepreneur who's built and sold 4 businesses, we shouldn't ever write women off. Women's careers are not linear. Diverse teams produce better outcomes. And I think that the menopause and recognising the business of menopause and the economic contribution of women in perimenopause and menopause is really important. So I say, let's welcome it, because employers have got to get smart. They've got to realise that women are often their best asset, and that women over the age of 45 or 37 in Zoe's case have a lot to contribute. And that's why I have become executive chair of the Better Menopause, because I want all of us to have a better menopause. And as an entrepreneur, I know that women in that demographic have a lot to give.
I was reading a post by Sophie Walker, former leader of the Women Equalities Party, former founding leader of the Women's Equality Party. She said it shouldn't be beyond the wit of man or woman to design a normal working life that takes account of it. Her argument being that being classed as a disability others women, when women, let's face it, in the workplace are often others. So she saw it as something negative. Why do we need it to be a registered disability? Why can't workplaces just accommodate it? Zoe, do you think it needs to be that strong for workplaces to get on board?
100%, yes, because you only have to look at what's happened. It's completely brushed under the carpet, and women come into work feeling horrendous. You know, I know that I did when I walked into Heart that day and I had to sit my boss down in a very small room having a hot flush in the middle of the day to tell him that I was in early menopause. I was received with love and compassion and open arms, but 1 in 10 women feel they have to leave the workplace. So if we have to really bang the drum, I mean, let's be honest, if this was a man's problem, sorry, forgive me, they would be building corners in offices, they'd be wearing smoking jackets with Xboxes and cold beers in the fridge. Like, you know, there would be spaces for them and they'd all be high-fiving each other. So for us now, we've got support and, as I said, care, and I feel like that's what we need. Why do we feel we have to leave the workplace?
Yeah, and I think also we're here, right?
Yeah.
We're having the conversation, and we all know that this is a reasonably new conversation to be having. I went into perimenopause 2 years ago after an illness where I was in hospital with pneumonia, and the antibiotics that I was on for a long time totally destroyed my gut. And I had no understanding that gut health and perimenopause were inextricably linked, and that what perimenopause was, I'd never even heard of it, right?
No
this
conversations.
is 2 years ago.
No.
What is it? I don't do that. I'm someone who's brand busy. I build businesses. I drive hard. What do you mean I'm in perimenopause? And so for that reason, founding the Better Menopause, and we've developed the first probiotic for perimenopausal and menopausal women called The Better Gut. And it's the first of its kind because nobody's been having the conversation. And I think there's a wave coming now of workplaces recognising that these women matter and this conversation being had on sofas or in chairs like this. And I think that can only be good news because 2 years ago, I'd never heard of perimenopause before I founded the business.
Well, I was going to say, we're in good company here.
Yeah.
We understand it. We're living it. We're going through it. But in reality, the other half of the population perhaps don't get it. There are, of course, men who are sympathetic because they are living with women going through it.
Lots of those.
But I'm just thinking about the fact that, you know, the Equalities Watchdog, their guidance means that employers could effectively be sued for disability discrimination, saying if a worker's menopause symptoms amount to a disability under the Equalities Act 2010, failing to make reasonable adjustments will amount to disability discrimination, which means that an employee could effectively sue that employer. And just being a cynic and knowing how the world works, could that backfire, this headline that you welcome, Debbie? Because it may well put off employers employing mature women, which, let's face it, is a problem in the workplace anyway. Another excuse for men to write women off.
Well, this is the argument, isn't it?
It is the argument, but maybe this is just entrepreneurs are universally positive. You know, the glass is always half full or kind of overflowing onto the table. But can we say that about women at any stage in the workforce? Haven't we been saying that about women who are of childbearing age? That they shouldn't be employed, that it's too difficult, that they can be sued, that maternity... I think, you know, it is far better for the conversation to be had and for the conversation to be had with men. Because throughout my career of building businesses that target the female audience, which is what I've done, as you know, we've got to bring men with us on the journey, right? We've got to bring men with us because the majority of economic power still sits with men. As a female entrepreneur, only 1% of capital goes to back a female founder. Unless we have the conversation with men, unless men are in the room, then we're not going to change the world of work for the future. We need our male allies. Women can't do it in silos. So I say, sure, maybe. You know, and of course, there are going to be examples that we don't love, but I think far better to have the conversation with men and women in order to change the way that the world of work
I completely agree with you.
Because women's careers are not linear, right? And if we're losing...
Well, we take time out to have babies, don't we? That's the other hurdle.
But also, how beautiful would it be to have that amazing conversation with your employer and for them to say, what do you need? What can I do to support you during this, let's be honest, in certain cases, very, very tricky part of your life? And then something amazing could happen, that it's not shied away from, it's actually embraced.
Stick and it takes carrot, right? It always does. And it takes money. You know, in the end, businesses are driven by economics. So we are becoming an increasingly powerful consumer. I think that we're going to become a very vocal, very economically contributing segment. 80% of consumer spend sits in the hands of women.
Your stats are amazing tonight. Can I just say
She's a stat woman, Debbie. Yeah.
I'm like, where are my stats?
The brain fog doesn't get her stats.
She's not really in perimenopause.
It's what when my brain fog's in because I start to ask a question. If it goes on for longer, in about 10 seconds, I'm still talking, trying to remember my point.
Okay, so we control the spend, right?
Yeah.
We've got to stay in the world of work. We've got to have a better menopause, and we've got to go where the money is and where the science is. You know, what's also happening, and one of the consequences of this is meno-washing, right? We know that when a conversation becomes more vocal, not everybody who sits within it is a good actor. But the more that we have this conversation with business, the more that, as with the Better Menopause, we use science, we develop solutions that help to support women, we bring men with us on the journey, the more that women stay working, happy, contributing for longer.
Again, bringing other women into the conversation, because I've been reading a lot of women writing about this today from various different angles. Anna Van Praag from the Evening Standard wrote a brilliant article, and I think I forwarded it to you, Zoe.
You loved it.
She also said that, you know, she didn't like the idea of women being stigmatised because women experience the menopause differently. Some don't even know they're going through it, some of them. So it's different for everyone.
75% of women have symptoms.
So, yeah, but not everybody wants to have a label going into the workplace and have special treatment. Zoe, what was it like for you? Because you went through it younger, so you almost had the double whammy of having to confront the menopause in the workplace, personally, and also going through it young, so people not quite getting that either.
Yeah, I mean, I've spent my whole career doing, live telly, live radio, being quick and being able to think very quickly with the brain that used to work like that. And suddenly that was stopped for me, which was very bewildering. I felt
And it's
very
one of just
frightened.
48 official symptoms.
Exactly,
Again, Stato Debbie was saying just before we came on air, 48 symptoms.
Yeah, and I think I experienced about 47 of them. As in, I felt like it was just a barrage of things coming at me. So not only did I feel like I'd lost a big chunk of myself, I felt very frightened at work because I was, bringing the mic up, trying to do a live radio show, and suddenly the words just weren't. It was like looking in a cupboard, trying to find the ingredients and thinking, I don't even know what I'm looking for now, which is really scary. But as I said before, I had Heart and Global, who were really super supported and said to me, whatever you need here during this period, we will be there for you.
Look,
lucky, actually.
Some people, well, look, you like to think the majority of businesses are sort of listening, whether they're acting yet or not. That's another matter. I don't know if you saw this a few days ago. This is Avanti, the rail operator. Yeah. And this was their goodie bag, if you like, for customers with the menopause. There was a tea bag, because tea makes everything better.
Are you joking?
There was a pencil to write things down you might forget. I think there was even a paperclip to keep things together, and a jelly baby whose head you could bite off. Okay. There's a lot of that out there as well.
Okay. Was a joke?
Don't know. No.
We're unsure. I mean, I really hope so.
They need some better gut probiotic supplements than their goodie bag, obviously. I mean, look, the point is we are on a journey with this, right? This is an educated audience, and 2 years ago, I'd never heard of perimenopause. So, look, yes, people are always going to be slower than others on occasion, and I think that that's okay. And I think always, if you look back over my career, 10 years ago, I started talking about the importance of women having better networks, and you know this from the Albright business that I built, and there was so much laughing at what we were doing, and people saying that it didn't matter and it didn't count, and that actually wasn't it sexism in reverse. And I think a lot of those arguments have faded away, and I think we're at the beginning of this conversation. So when I see things like that, I think, fine, we're doing what we're doing.
Well, it's being called out now. It's not just being accepted.
Absolutely. Whereas I don't think we would have been having this conversation about tea bags 2 years ago.
No. OK.
It's a joke, isn't it?
I know. Sadly, we haven't got a goodie bag with jelly babies or tea bags for you ladies to take away. Hopefully my company and me able to get my words out was gift enough for you both. Zoe Harmon and Debbie Waskow. I mean,
I love you, she's my best mate. She can say what she likes.
Move on. Right, thank you so much, ladies. Thank you. Right, still to come here on the UK Tonight. We're going to speak to one of the 3,000 people in Plymouth who have been evacuated from their homes after the discovery of that World War II bomb. Also coming up, more details on the government's legislation to exonerate victims of the post office scandal. And as a private company attempts to put a spacecraft on the moon later this evening, we'll be chatting to our science correspondent about the moon landing like no other. Hello, welcome back. You are watching the UK Tonight. Here's what's on the way. I'm going to speak to six-time London Marathon winner Baroness Grey-Thompson as the event becomes the first in the world to pay wheelchair and able-bodied athletes the same amount of prize money. And England make 2 changes to their team for the must-win test against India. We'll have the details with our sports presenter David Garrido a little later this hour. Now, more than 3,000 residents have been evacuated from their homes in Plymouth. This is after the discovery of an unexploded World War II bomb in a local garden. Devon and Cornwall Police declared a major incident on Tuesday, and they have now extended a cordon to 309 metres around that bomb. 100 armed forces personnel have been at the scene to assist with the evacuation of residents, and the Ministry of Defence said that bomb disposal teams were working to make the device safe. Well, joining us now on the UK Tonight, Andrew Early. He is one of the thousands of people who have had to leave their homes because of what is going on. Andrew, where do we find you tonight?
My parents' house.
Sorry, where was that?
My parents' house.
Parents' house, good old hotel of mum and dad. Presumably, it's a safe distance from what is happening at your actual home. Can you tell me how you found out about it and what was said to you?
Well, on Tuesday, we were told by friends, really, that it was happening. We were in the extension of the cordon, so we only found out we had to move last night. We got ready to move. We didn't get a letter through the door initially at the time we were expecting it, and then just at the last minute, we got moved on.
And Andrew, this must have been quite a big operation to leave your house because, you know, you don't live in your house alone. You've got a wife, 2 children, 3 gerbils and 2 dogs, I understand. And you probably don't know how long you're going to be out of the house for, is that right?
That's correct. They said roughly about 36 hours in the letter, but it's up in the air, really. You never can be that sure.
Are you in contact with your neighbours, the local community? Because, you know, looking at social media, there are some residents who haven't evacuated, and the majority of them is because they can't. But, you know, what have local residents been saying to you? Have you been keeping in touch? Is there a WhatsApp group?
I'm not part of any WhatsApp group, but I do have quite a few friends on the other side of the cordon that haven't left. They're doing okay. They're looking after neighbours and things like that.
And in terms of what you know about what's happening, are you getting any information as to what's happening with this bomb? Because, you know, looking at the history of your area, Keyham, you know, there were a number of World War II bombs dropped along the coastline there. So I would imagine everyone's getting a bit of a local history lesson at the moment.
Yeah, there's been a lot of that, as well as it being on the TV for local news as well. We've been doubly educated. People are sharing lots of stories on the social media, but some of it's getting slightly exaggerated, I think.
Yeah, the Ministry of Defence released a statement as to the type of bomb, saying it has multiple fuses. Have they given you any indication as to when this might be resolved, when they might be able to defuse this bomb?
We got told that it's hopefully going to make a decision tomorrow morning.
And in the meantime, you know, what's life like for you, Andrew? As I said, you've got a wife, 2 kids. This is a huge disruption. Obviously, the priority is keeping everyone safe and out of harm's way. But what's your plan for the foreseeable future?
Well, we're trying to make it a bit of an adventure for the kids, trying to keep their spirits up, trying to basically help them understand what it's like for people in more serious situations and what they're going through.
Yeah, Andrew, I like this idea. And look, it's going to come in as a useful history project, perhaps, for them at some point, right?
My son's very fascinated by all the history of it.
Yeah. OK, well, using it as a key learning opportunity for the children. I like it, Andrew. Thank you very much. Andrew Early, Plymouth resident, he's been evacuated from his home. Let's hope this all gets resolved quickly and safely and you guys can get back to your home. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Now, the government has set out criteria for legislation that is going to automatically exonerate victims of the post office scandal. The law is expected to come into effect by the end of July, and it's going to apply to convictions in England and Wales. The Post Office Minister admitted that the legislation could mean some genuine criminals are cleared, but said it was a price worth paying. Sky's business correspondent Adele Robinson has this report.
We will introduce new primary legislation.
It's gone from weeks to months. The deadline for post office victims to have their names cleared.
They've been working at pace to progress legislation.
Now it could be the end of July before a new law's passed, with a statement outlining criteria for hundreds of sub-postmasters wrongly prosecuted because of faulty Horizon software, including convictions quashed for those only in England and Wales, and only relevant offences such as theft and false accounting. Keith was given a bravery award from the Post Office for fighting off an armed robbery in Stockton. 7 years later, they prosecuted him for false accounting. He's waited over 20 years and wants to see his conviction quashed faster.
Judgments have been passed, decisions have been made. It seems, why not? And it's not just for me. There's people who, in 7 months' time, life will be very different. None of us are getting any younger. We all hope for the best and take what comes along. But it needs to get sorted.
Lawyer for the victims, David Enright's asking the Post Office Minister to redouble his efforts.
The announcement is welcome, but it delivers nothing. Conviction is quashed by this. No one receives compensation as a result of this. We are pleased that we've been given a timeline of July, but it is just an aspiration as yet.
So what is taking so long? Well, remember that this is an unprecedented piece of legislation, and there are objections from the judiciary over the precedent it could set, namely that some guilty people may end up being exonerated. But we understand the government is prepared to push on regardless.
Concerns too, some of those wrongly convicted may be missed, but a pledge to ensure rapid financial redress for those exonerated. Adele Robinson, Sky News.
Still to come on the UK tonight, we'll speak to 2 baby loss campaigners as the government launches a scheme to recognise the grief of parents who lose a baby in early pregnancy. Hello, welcome back to the UK Tonight. Now, away from the UK for just a moment, because a lunar landing like no other is expected later this evening. It's the first US attempt at a moon landing in more than half a century, and it's expected to take place within the next few hours. It's a private spacecraft from Texas nearing the moon's South Pole. Well, let's get the details with our science correspondent, Thomas Moore. And we've been bold here on Sky News, Thomas. On our yellow ticker, it says 11:24 p.m. You and I have done a few of these together, and we know that timing slipped, but that's the timing we're going for. Talk us through the night ahead.
No respect for TV schedules, moon landings. It's already slipped. They're going for an extra orbit around the moon. They want to make sure everything is right because landing is really tricky. Half of all missions fail. So expectations have to be tempered. Now, we know that it is currently 60 miles above the lunar surface. That is Odysseus as it left the Earth last week. It's beautiful, isn't it? And it has travelled 600,000 miles to get there. But it is now at a high orbit. It will, at 10 past 10 this evening, it will flip itself round and it has to brake with its main engine, slowing down from 4,000 miles an hour to virtually zero to land.
That's one
softly.
handbrake turn.
Absolutely right. So it'll do that in stages. It comes down to 10 miles above the surface and it stays there for another few orbits until they're happy with everything, and then it will begin to descend. So at 11:22 it will begin to come down and should touch down into the lunar dust at 11:24. Now that is going to be extremely tricky because it is doing it by itself. It is using its own cameras. It's using experimental laser guidance systems to bring itself down to a slow enough speed that everything is okay, that doesn't topple over like the last Japanese spacecraft. So a lot of hanging on this, and if it does reach the South Pole, they're hoping to find water down there someday.
Wow. A lot resting on what sounds like an absolute parking nightmare. Thomas, I know that you've got to follow the journey of this throughout the evening until it reaches its conclusion here on Sky News. We're going to have continuous coverage from 11 o'clock tonight, so stay with us for that. Thomas, thank you. And now the London Marathon is going to become the first event in the world to pay wheelchair and able-bodied athletes the same amount of prize money. Races for wheelchair athletes at the marathon were already the richest globally, but a further increase in pay now means that the total prize pot to be split among winners will be £243,000, creating parity with able-bodied counterparts. Well, earlier on today, I spoke to 11-time Paralympic gold medalist and 6-time London Marathon winner, Baroness Tanni Grey-Thompson, and I asked her for her reaction to the news.
It's really exciting. So, you know, when I retired, I sat on the board of London Marathon for quite a few years, and it's incredible. You know, there is going to be equal prize money. Anyone who wins the London Marathon, it'll be $55,000, about £43,000. And, you know, if you look back at the history of marathon racing, it's always been a really important race for wheelchair racers, but that equality hasn't been there. So, you know, well done to London Marathon for doing it. It sets the bar really high. And then it also starts another conversation. You know, we know disability pay gap is pretty atrocious in most companies. So if the London Marathon can do it, then businesses definitely can look at doing, you know, equal pay.
Yeah, work to be done. As you said, British wheelchair racing legend David Weir, of course, he said, this is a huge benchmark for disability sport, and I hope other races and sporting bodies can take note. Can you talk to me about what it was like when you were racing in the London Marathon?
Yeah, so, you know, in the early years, you know, the race, and this is races around the world, didn't necessarily understand or want wheelchair athletes to be part of it. You know, American athlete Bob Hall threatened to sue Boston Marathon to compete, and that's the reality of inclusion in the early years. And then it became, you know, quite an important part of people's Sunday TV watching. And so I won London Marathon 6 times. I would have to have won the London Marathon 28 times to get what the athletes are now getting. And I don't regret my time at all in sport. It was an amazing time to be involved. But that wasn't that long ago. So, you know, in the last couple of years, London Marathon have really stepped up. Now we're into equality.
We're talking about the elite level here, aren't we? But so much of disability sport is about this fight for parity. This is a development at elite level. At the other end of the spectrum, there's still a really big issue in terms of fair access to opportunities in sport.
Yeah, and, you know, as much as this is incredible and the 2012 Games, Paralympics were amazing, they didn't change the world for disabled people, let alone disability sport. So there are challenges in terms of disabled children in school, accessing PE, accessing sport outside school, you know, being treated as the same as everyone else. So, you know, there is always more to do. But these are the kind of the next things we need to be ticking off the list. Disabled children should have the same access to sport and PE as everyone else does.
And just while I've got you, recently you've been talking a lot about the menopause. And like so many women, you're going through it and you're talking openly about it. We're being encouraged to do that for the first time in forever. Today, we are being told that actually the menopause should probably be classed as a disability. As someone with a recognised and registered disability, as a woman and as a peer, what do you think of that idea?
Well, as someone who's going through menopause, who hasn't slept properly for at least a year, that recognition and talking about it, I talk about it a lot because I think we need to understand what women go through. I wouldn't go as far as talking about it as a disability, but actually there does need to be reasonable adjustment around it. You know, whether you're going through, you know, the sweats or not sleeping or just feeling, you know, out of sorts. I mean, the variants of people's experience are very different. But, you know, this is something that the vast majority of 50% of the population go through. And we need to be talking about women's issues and finding ways to tackle it and be understanding. So, again, this is another really positive step forward in terms of just treating people better.
Yeah, we're talking about it more. But, you know, I'm just thinking of those reading this news or watching it on TV, the idea that, you know, the menopause is comparable with those living with disabilities. You know, I just wonder how you feel about that, because the menopause is about talking about it, it's about understanding and making allowances. But, you know, does it really have to be classed as a disability? A lot of people are saying there is no comparison.
I mean, it's very different. So my impairment, I'm paralysed, that doesn't change at all any day of the week. What I'm going through menopause can change in an hour, let alone through 24 hours or a week. And just understanding what women are going through, I think is important. Personally, I wouldn't class it as a disability, but absolutely. And I think that's where we get a bit caught up. Reasonable adjustment, which is linked to disability, is something that's really important, you know, and men and women need to understand a lot more about it.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. Really good to talk to you. And yeah, so many women watching will be feeling your pain with the lack of sleep at the moment. Baroness, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Now, parents in England who lose a baby in the early stages of a pregnancy can now receive a certificate to recognise their loss. Before now, there was no official recognition for pregnancies lost before 24 weeks, babies, I should say. The government says that this scheme has been introduced to formally recognise the devastating impact of losing a child so early on in pregnancy. Well, joining me in the studio, campaigners Zoe Clark-Coates and Andy Clark-Coates. Congratulations to you both.
Thank you. Thank you.
This has been a hard-fought campaign that has personal resonance with you, because Zoe and Andy, you lost 5 babies between 2007 and 2011. What kind of help would this have been for you at that time, Zoe?
I think it would have been vitally important just to show us that our babies were recognised as that, a baby. I think when you speak to anybody who goes through this sort of loss, they'll tell you they feel isolated, they feel alone, they feel like they're the only person in the world who's going through it. And I felt like that, and I was a grief specialist, and I'd trained 20 years ago in grief support, and I honestly thought I understood loss. But then I went through it myself, and I realised all the training in the world doesn't prepare you for going through that heartbreak. And so to just have been given a certificate to say your baby matters, your grief matters, would have made so much difference.
Yeah, and they won't be forgotten. Andy, so often fathers are forgotten in this. And as a father, as a partner, of course, you want to focus on your partner who's been through this emotional trauma, physical trauma. What does this do for partners in this? Because this certificate is a recognition that mums, dads, partners can apply for.
Yeah. I think the thing that's really important is that when you don't get recognition, it's like they didn't exist in your family line. And so for millions of people out there, they have gone through baby loss and they literally look back and they may have had other children, they may have not had other children, but there's nothing that formally recognises what they've been through. And that's a really, really hard thing for both mothers and fathers. And sadly, baby loss accounts for about 70% of marriage breakdowns. Comes from baby loss, which is an absolutely huge statistic. And so it's really, really key to allow people to grieve well together, to communicate well together. And these certificates will be actually something that will actually be a real binding thing for people actually saying, yeah, this formally recognises what we have been through and the journey we've been through.
Because not only did you lead the campaign, but Zoe, you chaired and authored the research. What were families telling you and professionals telling you that led you to, well, a number of recommendations? This is the first that has come to fruition. So, for example, what were families telling you they wanted the certificate to look like and they wanted it to say?
Yeah, they were saying they wanted it to look official. They didn't want it to look like a commemorative, like almost a patronising pat on the back.
Those are available, aren't they? You can commemorate your lost baby in a number of ways.
And people can create them themselves, you know, online.
But this is government, this is official.
Government issued, and that was what was so vitally important to the families, that they wanted it to look like a birth and death certificate, to say, we honour your loss, we recognise what you've been through. And we were hearing that as a charity for the past 9 years since we were campaigning. And then when I was asked to co-chair and author the Independent Pregnancy Loss Review on behalf of the government, they said they'd like the certification process to be considered within that body of work, which was amazing. That work was extensive. It ended up producing 73 national recommendations, and it was laid in Parliament in July last year. And thankfully, the government accepted all 73 of those. And this is the first one that's come to pass. So we've still got a long way to go, 72 are the major changes to happen. But this is a pivotal moment, I think, because at last we're saying it's not just pregnancy loss, this is the loss of people's child, their hopes and dreams.
It's a baby from the moment you find out you are pregnant.
Absolutely. And those hopes and dreams start before you even get pregnant. Yeah. And so we just need to honour that and respect that. And then as soon as we can acknowledge this is a baby, I think the support we offer those families is completely different. It's not just treated as a medical incident.
And Andy, through your work with it, as part of the Mariposa Trust, you help 50,000 people?
A week.
A week?
A week.
This is huge. And, you know, the numbers involved are huge and bigger than people realise, because people still don't talk openly about it. And you know, the practical element to this is that you can apply for one of these certificates, Andy, back to September 2018. And the reason for that is a practical element, because the website's already crashed today, right?
It is, yes. So the government looked at it and said, we don't want a situation where it's so overrun that actually people are, you can't deliver. And so people are saying we actually want to, the government saying we really, really want this to be something that works for people. So let's open up for 5.5 years, back to September 2018, but we will open it up fully. So if you lost a baby 20 years ago, 50 years ago, 80 years ago, your babies will still be honoured, still be remembered, and you will be able to apply for a certificate.
It's going to be such a comfort for so many people. Zoe, just to end on, how can people go through this process and get the certificate? What's the website address?
So you just go to the government website, put in baby loss certificate, you will find it. All you need to be is over 16. You need to have lived in England at the time of the loss and still live in England, so the certificate can be posted out to you. It's a really simple process. It's a self-declaration. You don't need to provide evidence, which is so important.
Because a lot of baby loss happens before you've even got to a scan, before you've registered it with your GP.
Absolutely. And GPs don't actually have to record this, which is another shocking thing. So people don't have to supply evidence, and it doesn't matter what type of loss you've had, whether it be miscarriage, ectopic, molar pregnancy. That's not important to the application process. What matters is you've lost a baby.
Yeah, indeed. Zoe, Andy, thank you so much for coming in, and congratulations, as you said, Zoe. So much more to come. Thank you.
Thank you.
Coming up on the programme, ahead of a must-win test in India, England make 2 changes to their team. We'll have the details with David Garrido next.
In short, it's to raise money for charity. That was the bottom line of all of this. It's my 4th backwards challenge. They've gradually got bigger and bigger and higher. So I think this now is probably going to be the highest point I'll go to on the planet. But yeah, I lost my granddad to a heart attack a few years ago. And it was not just that, but also the stats and the numbers that come along with this that just blew my mind. So along with doing something for the world's first, so no one's ever been up and down Kilimanjaro backwards, and to raise some money for the British Heart Foundation, it seemed like a real sort of no-brainer. As you can see from some of this content, it's still a bit of a blur for me. I only got back a little under a week ago, so some of these videos that I sent over, it's pretty amazing to look back on. It's not easy doing either, if I'm honest. So going up to the summit, of course, you've got all the altitude involved. There's some really arduous tracks. You've got some pretty uneven pathways. But coming down, as you saw in that last clip there, it's pretty steep and it's loose shingle. So there's lots of slips, lots of falls. We use that short rope technique as well, just to keep me a little bit safer. I'd have probably said if you made me choose, coming down was a little bit harder than going up, which is maybe why the other 2 guys didn't do it in the first place. But yeah, amazing challenge. And it also made me the first European ever to make it to the summit. So these other 2 guys from all over the world have made it up to the summit, but no one from Europe before. It's a funny old thing. I'm a personal trainer, so the training thing was quite easy. And really the idea of training to do something quite specific, you just do that thing that's specific. So the more you work on that, the easier it becomes. You want to get good at riding a bike, ride a bike more. It's kind of that simple. Unfortunately, as you said there, we don't have much altitude here in the UK. We don't really have anywhere to practice higher. And also, I would say it was the sort of intangibles that I found really challenging. The porters and the food was also amazing out there. However, you kind of get a little bit sick of spaghetti by the end of the day. You're sleeping and sharing tents, so things like smells, things like packing your bag at the end of the day and unloading it at the start of the day. You didn't really prepare for it. I know physically not that challenging, just adds to a little bit more of the challenge, which I really, really didn't expect before heading out there.
Hello, you're watching the UK Tonight. David is here with the sport, and this is taking me back to my sports broadcasting days. The team news is in. Ben Stokes announcing his team for England's 4th test against India. Who is in and who is out?
OK, so 2 changes, as you mentioned just before the break. Ollie Robinson in for Mark Wood, so this is in the pace attack. Robinson's first game of the series. With Mark Wood, the effort he put in that last game in the 30s, he's such an explosive bowler. You've got to manage him. You want him at 100%, so that's clearly what England are doing here. So Robinson comes in, and Shoaib Bashir for Rayan Ahmed, 2 very young spinners. Shoaib Bashir, you might remember, is that player who had the visa issues when England arrived in
right at the beginning.
Right at the beginning, so he wasn't available for selection for the first test, but he did make his debut in the second test in Vizag, took 4 wickets on debut. So that means you've got Shoaib, Tom Hartley and Joe Root as spin options, James Anderson, Ollie Robinson, potentially Ben Stokes could also bowl. He hasn't bowled since July, had knee surgery in November, but he's recovered quicker than expected. So that could be a big boost for England if he does get a bowl.
And for those who haven't been across it, just describe how important this one is. Yeah,
look, they're 2-1 down in the series. They have to win to force a decider. That would be the 5th test in Dharamsala from March the 7th. England last won a series in India in 2012-13. It's the last series that India have lost at home as well, so it would be quite a remarkable outcome. But also, I think it would endorse Bazball as this way of playing. It doesn't just work at home in friendly conditions, it works in the toughest conditions against the toughest team, the best test team in the world. But before we get carried away, 4th test in Ranchi tomorrow. They need an all-round performance to level this series. So that's the cricket, but plenty of other stories that are making the headlines in sport this evening.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality. Getting more people more active. Live life with Vitality.
What we're going to do is play a little game called Fill the Blank. So all you've got to do is I'm going to read out a sentence, you're going to write down the word to fill it in. We're going to trust your spelling. I'm going to help you out if you don't know. I probably won't be able to, but I'll try my best. So yeah, just write down the word to finish the sentence. The first one is playing for Manchester United is.
Just get rid of that bit.
It's fine, yeah, just tell it right.
I think I saw it right.
Let's have a look.
Incredible.
Incredible, you have spelled that right, don't worry. Talk to me then about the last 10 years and how you kind of feel like you've developed and changed during that time.
No, first of all, it's, I put down incredible because, It's one of the biggest clubs in the world, if not the biggest. And it's obviously a real honour to be here for so long. You know, it's kind of my home now because I've been here so long, and of course there's been a lot of ups and downs.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality.
Right, let's take a look at the weather.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
After an exceptionally mild February so far, it's going to feel colder over the next few days as temperatures return to near average. Heavy rain, strong winds over eastern England. They'll clear this evening to leave a scattering of heavy showers, most widespread in the west. Blustery showers will affect many parts tonight, although they'll be fairly isolated in the east. Little snow is likely on some hills. It's going to turn chilly with a widespread frost in the north.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Now, we always like to leave you with something a little bit different on the UK tonight. How about this for a dramatic rescue? It's 4 fishermen who have been rescued after their boat sank off the west coast of Scotland. The Oban RNLI went to the aid of the men off the Gavelech Islands. Apologies to Scottish viewers if I pronounced that incorrectly, after it began taking on water. Now, when the RNLI arrived, they discovered 2 members of the crew on a life raft. 2 others remained on board in a bid to stem the flow of water coming in, but it sank in a matter of minutes, forcing the 2 remaining people on the vessel into the water. They swam to the lifeboat and they were pulled to safety. Some remarkable picture for the RNLI. Well done to all involved. That's all from the UK tonight. You can catch up on all the highlights on our webpage. Scan the QR code on the screen as well. Yalda is up next with The World.